Well, good afternoon and welcome to this first CAFI webinar of 2024 on artificial intelligence, technology, and the impact on life and health insurance in Canada with leading technology expert and speaker, Amber Mack. Amber Mack is a technology expert, author, host, and entrepreneur, and we're delighted to have her with us today. My name is Keith Martin, and I am Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Financial Institutions in Insurance, or CAFI. On behalf of myself and the CAFI Board of Directors, thank you for joining our webinar today. Well, CAFI is a not-for-profit association dedicated to the development of an open and flexible insurance marketplace. Our 14 members include the insurance arms of Canada's major banks and credit unions, along with their insurer partners, which underwrite credit protection insurance and travel insurance. This is another in our webinar series with key regulators, policymakers, and other experts and thought leaders in the insurance sector and on related societal issues. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the topic that we will be discussing today is artificial intelligence and other technology changes and their impact on the life and health insurance industry in Canada and the world. We are very fortunate to be joined today by Amber Mack. Amber is president of Amber Mack Media, Inc., an award-winning content development agency, an award-winning podcaster, This Is Mining, The AI Effect, and a best-selling author. She is also the co-host of the weekly emerging technology radio show and podcasts, The Feed on SiriusXM. In 2022, Amber joined the board of directors at GFI, a plant-based farm-to-fork food and ingredients company. In 2021, Amber was named one of the Bay Street Bull Women of the Year for her leadership in the technology sector. In 2028, she was named one of DMZ's 30 inspirational women making a difference in technology. As a child, Amber attended a two-room country schoolhouse and shared a party telephone line with neighboring houses. She's now recognized internationally as an innovation and technology leader. We are so fortunate to have you with us today, Amber. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to this fireside chat, but I thought I could actually start with a 10-minute presentation just to talk about the state of artificial intelligence in 2024.
Amber, that is fantastic. And I just want to finish a few more comments if I can, because there are some VIPs on the call that I just wanted to acknowledge. So sorry to interrupt you. I have just a few more statements to make, and then I'll pass it over to you. So I just do want to mention to the audience, Amber, that if there are any questions that anyone would like to pose to you during this webinar, they can send them to me as the host using the Q&A function of Zoom, and I will pose them on behalf of that individual. And unless you specifically request in your question to be identified as its host, I will pose all questions on an anonymous basis. And finally, Amber, just before we get the webinar underway, I want to extend a special welcome to a number of VIP guest attendees. We have representatives from our 14 CAFI member companies, our 9 associates, and we also have VIP attendees today from allied industry associations such as the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, or CLHIA, the Travel and Health Insurance Association, or THIA, the Canadian Bankers Association, or CBA, and as well from a number of insurance and financial services regulator and policymaking authorities, including the following: the Autorité des marchés financiers, or the AMF, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, or FSRA, the Insurance Councils of Saskatchewan, or ICS, the Government of Saskatchewan, the Alberta Insurance Council, or AIB, and the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, or BCFSA, and finally the Insurance Council of British Columbia. So welcome to you all. Sorry to have interrupted you there, Amber. I just wanted to get those final comments in, and now I will pass it over to you for your introductory presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So before we talk about what's happening today in 2024, let's take a look back at how far we've come. I'm going to show you a series of photos starting here at St. Peter's Square in 2005. As you can see, there's not a lot of technology in that photo except for a tiny little flip phone in the bottom right-hand corner. Fast forward the exact same location, St. Peter's Square in 2013. As you can see, every single person who is gathered there has some type of mobile device in their hands. It's staggering to see the shift that took place in terms of the mobile phone revolution within a decade. Then we move forward in our history of technology to the spring of 2020. At St. Peter's Square, it is empty, and the Pope is live streaming on Zoom, just like the rest of us. We have certainly gone through a lot over the past few years. And then in 2023, the Pope is the very first star of generative AI. Pictured here on a motorcycle and in a puffer jacket, definitely 2023 was really a tipping point when we look at the future of artificial intelligence. Now, when we talk about AI, we also know this stat to be true, and this is something that many of the attendees of my presentations are often worried about. We know that AI will impact about 80% of jobs. I think it's really important to remember that the word impact is critical here. The idea that it's not necessarily going to replace those jobs, but will absolutely impact the role that many of us play today. When we speak about the future of artificial intelligence, I always get asked this question: will AI kill us all? This is a concern that has come to my attention since I started speaking about this topic way back in 2018. Now, why do we think this? It doesn't help that we are inundated with images like this. We also hear from technology leaders such as Elon Musk, who say things like this: we'll be lucky in the future if the robots enslave us as pets. We certainly live in interesting times. Now, why, knowing all of this, am I still optimistic about the future? And I'm excited to share that optimism with all of you today during this webinar. Well, the truth is that humans are really good at one thing, and we have to constantly remember this. And that thing is relentless adaptation. We have always done this. Think back even over the past few years in terms of how much you adapted during the pandemic and shifted the way that you work. And then go even further back to 1857 and think of the first elevator, the first passenger elevator, and how terrified people were in terms of getting onto an elevator. Eventually that got comfortable, but even in 1920, they had to introduce elevator music because so many of the passengers were so uncomfortable with the constant swaying of the elevator. And it really took some time to adapt to this new technology and all of the innovation that was happening around us. But it is still true that even in fast-paced times, humans are really good at relentless adaptation. And when we look to the future in 2024, that's something that all of us have to start to practice. And it's not just about relentless adaptation, it's also about transformation. We have to take the action to be able to shift and adapt to these changing times. And the truth is this: in 2024, as much as we've seen change historically and innovation throughout the centuries, the reality is that change has never happened this fast before, and it will never be this slow again. When we think about the future of artificial intelligence, as someone who is doing a lot of speaking and writing on this topic, this is the one thing that I know people are really struggling with today. This fast-paced world that we are in right now, every single week, the advances are just absolutely staggering. And so many people feel as though they're going to be left behind, and it's hard to be able to keep up with this technology. If we think back to 2022, we saw the fast-paced world of artificial intelligence come into our lives. Think of ChatGPT. We know many of you probably saw this chart that was viral on the internet, that it has taken Netflix about 3.5 years in their early days to get to 1 million users. It took ChatGPT in 2022 just 5 days to get to 1 million users. This is just one example, again, of how quickly things are moving forward. And then even last summer, when we think about this rate of change, we saw a new social platform launched by Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. And it took them just 1 hour to get 1 million users on Threads. Again, the rate of acceleration is staggering. Mind you, they have a built-in audience already, but it's still impressive to be able to see how quickly we're getting to these numbers. Now, when we talk about some of the risks that exist, many times when I'm speaking at conference, including to the Thea group, which I know is here today as well, I look at some of the risks that exist in our world. In 2023, I was talking about these risks from the World Economic Forum. As you can see from this chart, The top risks are the cost of living crisis, natural disasters, geoeconomic confrontation, and the list goes on and on. But where are we at in 2024? Well, just a few weeks ago, the World Economic Forum released a new list. And I think what is worrisome for many of us is the shift that has taken place even just within 12 months. All of a sudden, when you look at this list, pretty much anything that you see in purple has a tie in with artificial intelligence. The risks have absolutely changed. And topping the list over the next 2 years is misinformation and disinformation, cyber insecurity. And then when we go out 10 years, of course, those risks still exist, as well as the adverse outcomes of artificial intelligence, technologies, and cyber insecurity. So it does feel like the world went through a lot in 2023, and the world ahead is much different than any of us expected. I'm excited to answer questions throughout this webinar. And I do want to say that one of the reasons, again, that I remain so optimistic about the future is that I believe that all of us need a framework to not just to be able to survive this fast future, but also to thrive. And a framework that I have worked on over the past couple of years is this framework called the PATH. When we think about relentless transformation, what do we need to do? Well, I would argue that we have to focus on these pillars. The first one is purpose, leading with values and action to match. And I do want to say that there's more and more research out all of the time that points in the same direction. That purpose and knowing what your values are is the perfect foundation for transformation in this age of artificial intelligence. The next one is the A, or AI and adaptation. Acquiring new digital skills as well as human skills, that's necessary for all of us. The third one is trust. And this is an important one when we talk about the world of artificial intelligence, knowing that we all need to know how to better nurture those human to human relationships. How do we share expertise? How do we practice consistency? How do we communicate better in this era where we can't necessarily really believe what we're seeing in front of us? This element of trust is something that I think we have to talk a lot more about. And then finally, and I know we'll be discussing this during this webinar, is health. The reality that we're in right now, where more consumers are taking control of their own health. They're embracing connected devices. They're using all of the data. They're bringing it into their doctor's offices. And we know that this is a world where more and more technology is playing that role, kind of that missing middle. And when we look at all of this together, this is really a framework to be able to thrive, this idea of the path, purpose, adaptation, trust, and health. If we think about all these pillars, both internally and externally within our organization, it's a really great roadmap for the future. So that was my brief introduction. I wanted to kind of set the stage in terms of sharing a little more as far as some of the work that I'm doing, some of the places where I'm spending the most time. And now I would love to start our webinar Q&A.
Well, that's excellent, Amber. And I do want to just pick up on your optimism and ask you how you'd respond to some comments that while we have adapted in the past, the pace of change has accelerated to a point where, are we going to arrive at a moment, Amber, where human adaptability is no longer able to sort of adjust? We're just not going to be able to cope?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that it is absolutely a risk that does exist right now. I think there are limits to how much we are able to adapt to new technologies all around us. I think that's why in 2023, you saw so many tech CEOs get together and actually sign that letter about having an AI pause and kind of stopping things for 6 months. At the same time that I think that maybe was a move in the right direction, I don't think it's really that feasible. I don't think you can slow down the world that is already building these new technologies. So I would say that the thing that the rest of us need to learn how to do is just to be smarter in terms of how we're approaching artificial intelligence in our businesses, and along the way ensure that we have guiding principles in place to ensure that data is protected, people are protected, there's not bias within some of these AI technologies that we're using. So really that governance piece becomes incredibly important. So I think it's possible to keep up, but I think it requires a total transformation in terms of how many of us are doing business. And that will be difficult for a lot of people to be able to adapt to those rapid changes.
Well, thank you for that, Amber. And I just want to pick up on your comment around slowing down. One thing that I've always found odd about those discussions that we've heard played out in the media recently is that what are you going to do about China? What are you going to do about Russia? I mean, if they're going to invest in these technologies, is the U.S. going to allow themselves to sort of fall behind? I think there is an international dimension where no one can control what other jurisdictions are doing, and so it's really not possible to stop it.
Yeah, I think that is true as well. And I will also say, it's a little bit of a challenge right now, recognizing that when I talk about speaking on this topic back in 2018, that people may not know this, but Canada has really always been a leader when it comes to AI research. We have many centers of excellence throughout the country and cities where there are some of the leading AI thinkers in the entire world. Yet at the same time, I think we've been a little slow to be able to be first out the gate as far as both adopting and putting AI into play within businesses, but also with some of the policies that we need right now from government to be able to ensure that people are safe, especially with the rise of misinformation and disinformation. So there is a window, I think, that does exist to move a little bit more quickly. But you're absolutely right. Canada has had a lead, but many people are catching up and now are further ahead.
Amber, I want to ask you a little bit about health and life insurance, which is the central focus of our association and our members. Obviously, health and life insurance will be impacted by people's decisions, by people's investments in healthy living. And we are seeing technologies. You mentioned people going into a doctor's office with data and with various technologies to share, with their medical practitioners. So I wanted to ask you about that, wearables and other technology changes that potentially could impact this element of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a number of new technologies that are really changing the future of how people keep track of their health. As I mentioned before, many of these are wearables, and we also see, of course, that there are apps as well that are leveraging artificial intelligence to keep up. I had a chance to just do a few slides on this piece as well in terms of some of the leading players in this space, just to give people a better sense of what I see as someone who also covers consumer technology in terms of who is really kind of driving innovation at this point and getting the attention of consumers. So the first company I want to mention is one called Whoop, and Whoop is an interesting player out there in terms of wearables. So we should start there. The idea is that it is a health tracker that you wear on your wrist. It manages and monitors things like your sleep, as well as things like your resting heart rate, all of these other data points. What's really interesting about Whoop, and I've been wearing one for the past couple of years, is that just recently they actually introduced ChatGPT into the app. And this is where things get especially fascinating. So now, based on the data that you have from your Whoop that's telling you about your sleep and your strain and all those other details, you have kind of a personal assistant or a coach within the app that is built upon ChatGPT that will help you decide, let's say, hey, what should I do if I'm taking a long haul flight based on my sleep and my strain and all of this other data that you know? What things should I do to ensure that I'm well rested when I arrive at my destination? So we see many of these wearables, and I think this is an especially important part, that are already building in different opportunities for AI in terms of allowing individuals to track their data, but have better results as well. So that's one quick example. We're also seeing chatbots is another one. There are wellness chatbots out there that are being used right now to help entire teams within organizations better manage their wellness. So that's another example of a technology that people are using all the time. This is called Wobot, one that I've been looking into a lot, and knowing that people are using this, again, kind of like a daily check-in, an interesting play on the wellness front. And then finally, the last one that I'll mention is relatively new. This is out of the Consumer Electronics Show just this past January. And this was called BMO. And what's interesting about BMO is that it's a brand new device, unlike anything I've ever seen at the consumer level. So this is a product well beyond just kind of a wearable that you put on your wrist. It's an entire device that is essentially trying to create almost like a doctor's office at home. So you have all of these features built in that will allow you to do a number of things, as you can see here, in terms of your temperature, keeping track of data in terms of your heart, all of these other features that you typically wouldn't find in at-home consumer level devices. So they've built all of this into BMO. It was launched by a company called Withings. And again, you can see how advanced this is compared to kind of the early days of wearables, where we were talking specifically just about tech like Fitbit. So we have definitely come a long way on this front. And I think more and more you're going to see people who are trying to harness the power of this technology to kind of close the gap in terms of doing a better job of preventative health.
Well, that's really fascinating, Amber, and I can clearly see the implications for health and life insurance, and not that far down the road. It's happening right now. A couple questions from the audience, Amber. One is about how AI is driven by IT, and that's an industry that's challenged by recruitment issues around qualified people. So, what are some of your thoughts about how to deal with that sort of labor shortage and labor challenge?
Yeah, I mean, there are massive labor shortages right now. I was just reading recently in terms of AI specialists. I think they're calling them today chief of AI within organizations. Some of those jobs are being posted right now with $1 million salaries. We know in cybersecurity is another example that there's a real shortage of hundreds of thousands of jobs in terms of finding people to fill these roles. So I think you bring up a really good point. The skills shortage is very, very real. This is something that we're going to have to face and fix. And even though we talk about job losses with artificial intelligence, it's important to remember there's going to be a lot of net new jobs, especially in the IT space. So, training, upskilling, all of those things become so critical for the future. And even building those programs into what you already do to ensure that people who are in certain roles have kind of a path to the future in terms of how those roles are going to evolve or advance. So that is a big concern of many organizations I speak to. Just the reality that the skills needed right now, again, we have that shortage out there. And again, that's where so much of the conversation around upskilling becomes so critically important. It's a reminder of this slide that I often show in my presentations, talking about what I think is so necessary right now in 2024. It's a quote from the late futurist Alvin Toffler when he said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." I love this quote. I love that we're talking about this on a webinar because I think this idea of kind of constant learning and upskilling and reskilling is going to have to be built into the DNA of every company in the future.
Well, I've got a follow-up on that very comment from the audience that I'd like to ask you, Amber, which is, how many years from now do you expect to see a clear distinction in performance of non-technology companies, like insurance companies, between those who have embraced AI in their day-to-day jobs with employees and those who missed the boat?
Yeah, I mean, that's the piece that I think we're not talking enough about. I think to me, it feels like we are missing an opportunity right now to bring more people along on this AI journey. So within any organization, if you can, whether you're a tech organization or not, I think we have to think about, what does our AI roadmap look like? What is that journey? How do we ensure that we bring the most people along as possible in terms of, again, getting into that upskilling, that retraining? And I think that we're not that far away from, within the next couple of years, entire jobs being completely shifted or affected based on the fact that AI software development is just moving so fast. If I can just share another quick example, and this is very specific, but I think it'll give people a sense of how things are moving forward in the future. There's this software that I've been experimenting called HeyGen. It's relatively new, And last year, they were a software company that was talking about the fact that you could use their software to be able to translate videos. So make people who were speaking one language on camera appear to be speaking another language. And they would do that by using AI to basically move that person's lips to make it look like they were speaking another language and dub it over in that language using the person's voice. So this is kind of a deep fake audio, for lack of a better word. So last year we were talking a lot about how new that was. And then all of a sudden this year, here's a quick example, just a very short video that I want to show you of how advanced this is. And think about how many jobs it used to take to be able to do something as sophisticated as this.
Welcome to the definitive iPhone versus Android video. De acuerdo. Bienvenido al video definitivo de iPhone versus Android. D'accord. Bienvenue dans la vidéo finale de l'iPhone versus Android.
So that quick demo there, you saw that within one click, you could take a video that someone had created, maybe for your marketing department, maybe it's your CEO, and automatically translate it so they were speaking, you know, dozens of different languages within mere minutes. I mean, again, even a year ago, this wasn't really possible without it looking pretty fake and pretty pretty flawed. But today we've come so far with that. So I think that back to the question, I think we're talking, you know, just a couple years out before entire jobs are going to be impacted in a way, if there isn't work put towards upskilling, that those jobs will be affected in pretty dramatic ways.
So wait and see is not the right approach.
Oh, no. But I don't think that's the right approach to technology. I moved out to San Francisco in 1999 during the dot-com boom. And I think a lot of people waited to see, you know, jumping on the internet boom, jumping onto social media. And the early adopters tended to do a little bit better.
Right, right. I want to ask you, Amber, about AI algorithms. Of course, they start at the beginning from a human programming rule. So you get humans are programming the rules, but at some point, there may be legal and ethical interplays between what the software programs do and the original human that programmed them and that person's intentions. So my question is there a risk that the machines will learn separately from the humans who program them and develop potentially their own approach?
Well, I think this is the risk that a lot of people are probably most worried about. This idea that all of a sudden the machines will have what we call kind of a general intelligence to be able to kind of put those their rules and their own rules and parameters into place. And I mean, not only should we kind of worry about that, there are plenty of big tech players who are already building and trying to move in that direction. OpenAI, of course, the makers of ChatGPT, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg has already announced their efforts to want to move into this area of artificial general intelligence. So I would say, generally speaking, I think there is a concern out there that if we don't have better guardrails in place, this is going to get out of hand. And then I would really caution people, if they don't already, to have some type of AI governance framework in place. And to me, that feels like, again, just kind of a starting point to ensure some of these things don't happen, and also to ensure that you have control over what you're building in the future. EY said it best in this slide in terms of organizations needing to really establish a generative AI governance framework that is unbiased, resilient, explainable, transparent, and performance-based. I think if we can get these pieces right, there will be less of a concern about kind of runaway AI in the future.
Well, thank you for that, Amber. I want to talk to you a bit about government and the role of government in this space. We know in terms of privacy, that's already an important issue in big tech, and it could become even more important going forward. People are worried about whether they have control over their own data and how it's used in future. You mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. We just saw him being grilled in the US Senate, and it was a very heated exchange. And there's clearly a lot of pressure for governments to regulate more and be more involved in this space. What's your perspective, Amber, in terms of what the government's role should be?
Well, I mean, I think the government needs to step up and be more involved in terms of regulation as far as artificial intelligence, knowing that in some cases, we've already seen that it is a really serious threat. I think, probably the first place we're really seeing that is the rise of deep fakes, specifically on disinformation and misinformation. It's no secret that in 2024, we are going into a year of historic elections all around the world. And we know we've already seen a number of deep fakes that are spreading online, specifically targeting women when it comes to things like non-consensual porn. Deep fakes is one example, potentially ruining lives, impacting how people go about their day to day. And more importantly, I think to bring up what happened yesterday at the hearing with all the big tech players, potentially ruin the lives of children as well. So I think governments around the world need to get together and ensure that there are laws in place that protect people from what is absolutely the downside of this technology. When we talk about things like deepfakes, in the US, for example, there are some states that have put forward laws to protect people in a more significant way. And they're looking at something federally in the US as well, just as of late, especially on the heels of what happened with Taylor Swift and the deepfake issue last week. So I would say that governments have to play a bigger role. And the good news, if I want to keep this hat of optimism on, is that I think we're seeing governments from all around the world that are finally waking up and understanding the important role they have to play, and they're working with other governments because we know, again, there's no borders in this world of digital and AI, and so I think it needs to be a global approach in many instances.
Great, thank you, Amber. Let's do a poll now. We're going to ask a question of the audience. I'm going to launch it right now. And the question is, I believe that artificial intelligence will have a transformative impact on the life and health insurance industry over the next 3 years. So it's a yes or no question, and we'll just give you a few seconds to offer your thoughts. All right, so people are just answering now, Amber, and I should be able to read the results in just a moment.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to share the results. And you can see here that 88% say yes. I'm a little surprised that as high as 12% say no. What are your thoughts, Amber?
There's always those people, I think, that are skeptical about the impact that AI might have. We tend to overhype technologies. I've certainly seen that over the past few decades with new and emerging tech. But this one does feel a little bit different. So I'm going to sit with the majority of people here in terms of the ability to really transform your industry, and I think it's true of all industries. So, but I understand the perhaps skepticism that it can have a big impact. But I think we're already starting to see that in a number of different ways, even from a productivity level, right? I think there's just so many examples of how AI can be beneficial in our day to day.
And I do have a follow-up question that relates to this poll result, which is, what additional guardrails do you think may be required around generative AI in insurance, especially as it relates to the classic insurance information that needs to be provided, benefits, limitations, and exclusions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we talk about the term AI guardrails, I think it's something that we hear a lot about. And I think it's kind of the perfect way to explain how we're going to move forward with this technology, but kind of have the guardrails in place to ensure we, don't go off the side of the road, so to speak. So I think having a framework in place, as I had just mentioned, is really, really important. But I would also argue, because you mentioned generative AI, which I'm sure most people on this webinar are familiar with, which is, of course, the ability to be able to generate net new content. I think one of the concerns there is that if we go down this path and are leveraging generative AI as much as it seems we're going to, I think there's going to be this middle period where we have to have more transparency around how we are as organizations using generative AI. If you think about the New York Times, for example, when they're publishing any images that are created using a generative AI tool, they're labeling it and saying created by AI. There's just a little bit of a disclosure. I would argue that the same kind of rules have to exist for many organizations and across industries, where when you're using AI in certain instances, you need to be transparent about that. And if I can just share a very quick story, I don't know if people saw this, but a few weeks ago, the mayor of New York City, he was actually doing robocalls that were created using AI technology that would allow his voice to be heard by people who were speaking a number of different languages, his constituents. But it was sent out in dozens of different languages, so that it appeared as though it was him who was actually calling his constituents. It sounded like his voice, but he was speaking these different languages. But what was really interesting is that then if the mayor of New York was walking down the street and someone came up to him and started speaking that language, he, of course, did not know how to speak some of these languages. And so it became a really uncomfortable situation because there was no transparency or disclosure about the usage of the generative AI tech in the first place. I think all of us, in hindsight, looking at a story like this, we can say, okay, well, make the robocalls, but off the top of the robocall, there should be a little disclaimer where the voice says, hey, I don't speak this language, but I'm using AI tech to communicate with each of you. And then there would be less of that confusion. That's a great example of where trust and transparency becomes so important in this age of artificial intelligence. Another thing that I talk a lot about is this idea of the triangle of trust. And that means when we have, yes, you want governance and guardrails in place, but we also have to think about how we use generative AI, how we can be transparent about that usage when required, how we can be consistent in that communication as well. All of those things I think are going to be even more important in this age of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in some cases we're moving to a prior way of doing things. My daughter in high school, Toronto District School Board now does not allow you to submit essays. They expect you to write them in freehand in the classroom so that they can watch and see that it's really being done by the person who's submitting it. Which brings us back 30 years and sort of means that we can't use all these technologies that are available to make it easier to write an essay. So I just thought that was very interesting in terms of how it's moving us in some surprising directions.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us have seen it with our kids. My son's also 14, and I watch how he's using AI in different ways. And I think what you bring up is a good example of, like, I think there's this tendency now in education of wanting to identify it to make sure nobody's using the tools because it's kind of akin to cheating. But I think it is also fair to say that longer term, there'll probably be less of a focus on this. And I would even argue, I was just talking to my son's principal the other day, how maybe the curriculum also adapts. So, for example, maybe writing, not that it won't be important, but maybe presenting and verbal communication will be increasingly important, knowing that it's harder to fake that, being able to take something you've written and then present it to the class. Those will be skills that will become more important in the future. So I think some of these things will kind of adapt and change over the years to come.
I want to ask you a question about the government sector again. Life insurance is regulated at the provincial level, and regulators and policymakers in each province have, of course, limited resources, as we all do. They have huge mandates to protect consumers. They regulate companies with hundreds of thousands of employees and millions of customers. So regulatory technology, or RegTech, is becoming an important field where regulators and policymakers can use technology to potentially identify where there might be some trends that worry them that they need to investigate. Amber, I want to ask you whether you feel that RegTech could help regulators and policymakers determine what areas to focus their attention on, and what is the potential for technology in this area to be impactful in terms of consumer protection.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that after speaking about this topic over the past few years, I've spoken to all different types of audiences, and I think there's always a scenario where where this technology can be helpful and where it can really be beneficial to an organization. But you're not really going to know that unless you have people who are kind of keeping an eye on how it can be used, the guardrails in place when it is used, paying attention when you talk about new technologies of, hey, maybe there's something better in 2025. You don't want to get tied into kind of a 3-year license of a technology that is maybe not as advanced as some of the competitors in that space. So I bring this up because I think there's always an example and a scenario where AI can help, where software can be beneficial, but unless you have people with kind of their attention and eyes on how that can happen, it's not going to just happen out of the blue or naturally. So one of the things I've seen a lot of organizations do, and some of them that I've worked with over the years, is that they put together almost like an AI task force. So a group of people who meet every month and they're responsible for deciding, hey, can this be beneficial to us, to our consumers or our customers? How can it help us? Analyzing some of the software that exists out there, looking into that software, ensuring there isn't any type of bias baked in. All of those things become kind of the role of that task force. So to me, it feels like it's kind of inevitable that many organizations will get to that point.
All right, thank you for that. We have a question from somebody who I'm assuming must be in sales and is looking at new business opportunities. We know cybersecurity insurance has become a booming field. This individual is asking whether there might be a new insurance industry around protection products to protect against harm produced by AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything is possible at this point. I don't know specifically what they're talking about in terms of that the definition of harm as far as how they would describe it. But certainly within cybersecurity, if you think about things like fraud, for example, software that would help to do a scrape of the dark web to see if there are deep fakes that are using your likeness, how you could get those taken down. I mean, there's going to be industries that are going to be impacted. There's going to be new jobs that are going to be created, especially within cybersecurity. So I think it's true to say that many of us in the future will be affected by AI in a number of different ways. And I think the likelihood that more people are unfortunately targeted by some bad actors out there, I think is also going to be true, whether that's mass cyber attacks that take place that are fueled by artificial intelligence, whether it's software systems or maybe through social media to individuals, deep fake campaigns that are launched. I fear we're going into this almost like a Black Mirror episode, if anyone's seen that series, where we're going to have to pay a little more attention in terms of our likeness and our reputations online, knowing that these attacks can happen much more quickly than before and at a much larger scale.
Now, I see, Amber, that you just recently did an interview with Michelle Donnellan, of the UK Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Tell us a bit about some of the nuggets you garnered from that.
Yeah, so we sat down actually right here in my studio in Toronto on her visit to Canada. She was here for a few days, and we talked about a few different topics. Many people may have seen that there was a UK-led AI safety summit that took place in November of last year. They had a number of high-profile thinkers come. They had tech leaders like Elon Musk, who also spoke there. And the goal has really been to try to get a number of countries who are AI leaders to work together to establish guidelines and a framework to be able to move forward in terms of policies that help to protect people, keep people safe. And they recognize, I think, specifically when talking to the Secretary of State, that this has to be a global effort, because it cannot really happen in isolation. You don't want to just see sort of one region that is tackling these issues, because we know, of course, the web has no boundaries. And we had a number of conversations that really focused on how countries can work together, why that global collaboration is important. And also, I think, recognition that nobody really has the perfect answer just yet. And that's why I go back to this idea, like, I know people are overwhelmed. I know that it's a lot to be able to think about how to move forward. But I would also argue at the same time that there's kind of a window of time right now, because no one else has really figured this out. At the beginning of 2024, our window is starting and the months are ahead that we have to be able to do this. And so I think Minister Donlan, that's one of the things she just talked about, is trying to tackle this growing issue, and not just having annual summits. They have another one that's coming up in just a couple of months, So we had some good conversations around this topic, and it became increasingly clear to me, as much as I feel like Canada is behind, I don't think anyone has really totally nailed how to move forward and kind of bring as many people along this AI journey as we need to.
Excellent. I want to delve a little bit more deeply into the earlier conversation we had, Amber, around wearables and the use of technology in life and health insurance. So certainly, life and health insurance is data hungry. A lot of the sort of products that are developed and the premiums that are associated with them are based on actuarial and statistical analysis. So something like AI or machine learning, which can crunch huge amounts of data and identify patterns, would be very powerful in the industry. So could you comment a little bit about what you see coming down the road that could impact the industry in terms of that data element?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's just another great example of how so many industries can benefit from AI technology, and just the rate of acceleration and the advancement of some of the software that does exist to help us do our jobs better and frees us up a little bit, to do maybe some of those jobs that can't be done necessarily by machines. So I think you bring up a great example, of course, in the insurance industry of how this software can be hugely beneficial. I think from an individual standpoint, as well, when we think about data collection, we think about the fact that more and more people are using wearables and using health tech, if we can put it in that broader category. I think there's also the question of, hey, how do we keep all of that data safe? How do we harness that data in positive ways? But I think, the missing piece for me is also how do we educate and communicate to people how this data is being used, how we are protecting it, all of those pieces as well. I think that makes people a little bit fearful about some of this technology, not knowing that some of that personal data that becomes so intimately personal when we're talking about health, especially down to a person wearing a wearable that is monitoring their sleep and all these other patterns. How do you communicate to those individuals that if you are, accessing their data or using their data, that it is in fact safe? And let's be honest, no digital data is ever 100% safe, but I think we can do a better job of kind of communicating and protecting that data through the process.
Well, thank you. I'd like to tap into your knowledge and your insights in terms of other technologies that are coming down the road. I mean, artificial intelligence, it caught a lot of us by surprise. Are there some other technologies that are coming down the pipeline, Amber, that could be similarly catching us by surprise? And I'm thinking of some specific examples like quantum computing, biologically inspired computing, and nano computing. So if you could offer some thoughts on these sort of other emerging technologies, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, they're probably overwhelmed right now, even just on the AI front, knowing this is early days for so many people. So when we think about emerging technologies like quantum computing, I mean, you can kind of put some of these technologies into the category of, okay, we're going to see machines being able to do things a lot faster and at a speed that we never ever anticipated, especially when it comes to solving problems. So I don't know if the touch point with some of those emerging technologies that you mentioned will be that immediate with a lot of the people in the group right now. But what I will say is I think what we're seeing with AI is that it's got tentacles into all of these emerging technologies that we see out there. So when we talk about emerging tech, whether it's quantum computing, or we're talking about virtual reality, or augmented reality, or any of these types of technologies, what you'll notice is that there's that AI thread throughout pretty much everything. And so I think that's why AI is kind of this beast. It's like that snowball rolling down the hill that we have to wrap our hands around and get a hold of it before it crashes in and destroys an entire town. I think that's one of the things that is probably most important for people right now before we focus on some of these other emerging technologies that might be a little further down the road and maybe not as immediate, or have as big of an effect right now. AI, I think, will be something that, if I had to guess right now and sort of plan for the next 5 to 10 years, I would say that's going to be kind of central and core to what most of us are dealing with in terms of emerging technologies, which would be similar to what we saw during kind of the internet and the dot-com boom, where the internet became kind of central to the way a lot of us did business. We're going to see the same thing with AI, but I would argue, 100-fold. Like that's how much bigger of an impact it will have.
Well, let me draw on that and ask you, Amber, if you were advising a CEO of a life insurance company about what they should do in response to these developing technologies, and specifically, where they should invest, where there's so many pressures right now in industry between climate change, evolving technologies, shifting patterns around employees' expectations. COVID has raised all sorts of really interesting issues around work at home versus work in the office. There's a labor shortage. So if you're dealing with a CEO who's sort of grappling with all of these pressures at the same time, what would your advice be in terms of practical things they could do in response?
Well, I would say that first of all, I think it's always difficult to sort of imagine what other people in other industries are going through. But I can say from my own professional experience, speaking again to CEOs in all types of industries, I think the one thing that is probably the most accessible in terms of what to do is to really think about, hey, what's my framework for getting through the future? When I shared my framework in terms of the path, one of the reasons I focused on these pillars is to touch on a lot of the topics that you were talking about just now. When we think about purpose in that pillar, I actually talk a lot of my keynotes about climate and the importance of having a sustainable strategy for the future. So that's kind of the purpose piece. The adaptation, that piece becomes all about upskilling, reskilling, getting those new digital skills, and honing in on those human skills and improving those as well. The trust, that the health piece in terms of remote work, and knowing people, especially the next generation, want more flexibility in terms of how they come to work. They also want different perks when they come into the workplace, and that next generation, Generation Z, has shifted things a lot. So my advice for any executive would be to really, hey, I've put my own framework together in terms of listening to people and studying this space and understanding what's necessary. What I see when I look at this framework is really kind of at either side of it. When we talk about purpose and health, it's like protecting the planet, protecting people. And in the middle, we have adaptation and trust. And so I see all of these four things as working together. But hey, these may not be, perfectly fit for what you're trying to do, but come up with your own framework. And I think when we simplify things in terms of focusing on these pillars, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to manage things in this age of artificial intelligence, and answer the questions we have to answer, come up with a strategic plan that we need, and communicate effectively to groups in terms of what we're doing. So that's all kind of at the foundation of all of this. So I think building your own framework, 3 or 4 pillars that you're going to work on. I think most of the executives that I've talked to, when they kind of simplify things in that sense, it becomes a lot easier for them to plan in the future, and then assigning people to be responsible to focus on these emerging tech changes that are happening, specifically around the topic of artificial intelligence.
I want to ask you how AI and new technologies have affected your job and your role.
Well, I will say, and I'm glad you asked me that question, because many people may think, okay, well, why would you ever talk about artificial intelligence? I work in the media space. We create content as a business. A lot of that has been automated. But there was a couple of things that we've recognized over the past couple of years. One is that most recently, for example, when I use AI tools, there's one I use called Opus Clip. This is a tool that allows us to take, we do a lot of long form videos. That's really kind of the core of our content business, where I'm interviewing thought leaders and politicians and people talking about emerging technology. So we dump one of these 10-minute or 20-minute videos, we upload it to Opus Clip. And what this software does is that it actually automatically creates a number of short little vertical videos, and it automates the entire process. So when I upload a 20-minute video, all of a sudden I'm able to get potentially, 10 short vertical video clips for social media that are automatically captioned. But even better, what it's able to do is it actually assigns out of 100 kind of a rating in terms of those videos and the ones that will resonate the most online, and gives me that long list. So that's a long-winded way to say that I'm using software right now that is saving us potentially every single week 10, 20 hours of editing work for clients because we're automating away that piece of it. Now, you may think, well, it was your business to actually create those clips. But actually, we're better off doing some of those higher value things, meaning getting more people in the studio, shooting more content. So just kind of a long-winded way to say that I don't see it as a threat, but I see it in terms of all of the tools that we're using, and we're using a lot of AI tools right now, as being able to have an advantage and be more competitive in the space that we play in.
Well, thank you for that. The hour has just flown by. We're coming to the end of our webinar, Amber. It's really been instructive to listen to your brilliant insights. I can't thank you enough for taking the time with us today. And I hope that we will at CAFI be able to keep in touch with you and have a further conversation in future. I want to end, Amber, by just asking you for your final thoughts and advice. Your parting words of wisdom to those who are attending this webinar today.
My parting words of wisdom are that, first of all, it's not too late to get up to speed on AI. Again, the next few months are kind of a real tipping point in terms of being able to put a plan in place, but there still is lots of time. Most industries I speak to, they're feeling exactly the same way. They're feeling behind, overwhelmed. We all partake in those feelings around how fast this is moving forward, but it is possible to keep up, focusing on the framework. And the very last thing I will say, and this is a free resource for everybody, but every Tuesday I send out a weekly newsletter, and AI is at the core of all of my writing, completely free to get. And here's a QR code if you want to put take your phone and take a picture of it, going right to the link on my website and sign up, or you can go to ambermac.com/newsletter. So again, this is a great Tuesday resource where I'm working through all of these AI stories and technologies that are shaping our future, trying to put it into simple terms to help everybody adapt on this journey, totally free and easy to access and no strings attached. I have nothing to sell you, but information, knowledge, and leadership. So check it out. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. That hour flew by.
Yes, no, I agree. And I will mention, Amber, that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the CAFI website, CAFI.com. And we'll have the link to your newsletter there as well, and also a summary of this event. So anybody who's missed this today, and colleagues of yours, you can refer them to the CAFI website, and they can have the opportunity to catch up on this webinar at that time. I want to thank the people who attended today, but I especially want to thank you, Amber, for an absolutely brilliant and insightful conversation. I really learned a lot, and we were so lucky to have your insights as part of this webinar today. So a big hearty thank you on behalf of CAFI.
Hey, thank you so much. It was so much fun being part of the conversation. Thanks for the excellent questions. And hopefully I'll talk to some of you in the near future. Let me know what you're doing on the AI front. I'd love to include it in an upcoming presentation.
Wonderful, we will. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.